chances of applying?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So you are not alone. This is a spot that a lot of students are in where either for a variety of reasons, maybe they just like don't have access to a lot of activities at their school. And there's kind of two answers to this. Number one is, again, you're not going to be penalized for what you don't have access to, right? So if you didn't have access to Model United Nations and AP classes and a bunch of activities, if your school doesn't do theatrical productions, then it's not that you will be dinged for the lack of those things. But a way to consider it is again, like, what do you have interest in, B? Right? And like, how can you start to be curious with yourself? It might be a solo activity. It might be that you read a few books on a certain topic that you feel interested in, or you're like, oh, sociology feels like a cool thing that I don't know of. Find a syllabus from a college, maybe pick a couple articles or texts that that are part of a college syllabus and read those, right? There's still kind of like personal development that can happen in isolation by yourself, that is just guided by like, what feels interesting to you. Take a look at some college websites and what majors they say. Many majors, most students haven't even heard the name of. You're like, what does that even mean? Like, what does that imply? What does biology and society mean? Is that really about ethics? Oh, that's cool. Let me do a little bit of digging, right? Use your curiosity as a jumping off point to say, the second you feel a little spark of excitement or a spark of interest, go there, right? See what levels you can peel back over and over. So I think the two things that I'll say are that you are not going to be penalized for what you don't have access to. And not having a lot of activities in your school is not necessarily an excuse for personal development, right? Is there actually a club that you wished existed, right? Is it about, maybe it's an interest club, maybe it's an identity club, maybe it's around some world event, maybe it's about climate change, maybe it's about gender identity, right? And if you want that to exist at your school, can you be the agent for that change, right? Can you maybe informally or formally talk to other students and say, I'm interested in starting up like a group where we talk about this maybe every other week or once a month. Are you interested in joining? If you want a dance team at your school and there's not one, you can dance, right? If you have a body and you want to, you can, right? So, and it might be that thinking about what you wished you had access to can allow you actually to like create some of those opportunities, even at a really small scale. Those things can still be really valuable. And like, who knows what those things might open up into, and that might be a really rewarding thing for you. So in short, you will not be penalized for what you don't have access to, and use that to actually consider, what do you feel interested in doing and spending your time. Great, thanks, Zoe.
Thanks, Corey. Last question about activities. In the registration form, we have this question: how to make myself stand out when doing online extracurricular projects?
Yeah. That one's huge. Yeah, let me pause and think about that one for a second, because the way that one stands out is again, I think that is very naturally the goal that we think about. But the way that one stands out is actually not because they were trying to stand out. And that's a really hard thing. That's really hard to pull ourselves away from like the intended outcome to just like do and be where we are. So the way that students really stand out is from deep and genuine investment in the things that they care about. So particularly, like the other side of that is that I hear you talking about online stuff. If the online portion doesn't feel that fulfilling to you, right, can you supplement that with other things, right? Are there a couple friends of yours who also maybe took the same program or are interested in the same thing, or maybe a couple other kids from the program that you took, and say like, is anyone interested in just like talking about this, right? Discussion-based learning is huge, right? Can you deepen your experience of that thing, and then potentially the impact of that thing in your life by supplementing it in ways that you maybe wished had been a part of it to begin with. I think that like standing out with online things in some ways, colleges know that if things were shut down, things were online, right? It's not going to, again, you're not going to be faulted for having done online activities. The big thing is like, how did you guide those, right? And like, again, what choices did you make around those activities? So did you choose to really pursue intellectual investment? Are there books you can supplement? Are there conversations? Are there Coursera classes? Are there other student groups? Can you start a club at your school around that thing? Is there already a group in your community who's talking about a similar thing? And so I think it's kind of a similar answer, is that like, you're not going to be faulted for what you didn't have access to. If it's all online, it's all online. That's fine. You still can show the direction of your interest through online programs, right? So like, did you do a pre-med track for an online program? That's going to be different than someone who did a coding track, or that's going to be different than someone who did who participated in an online performance, right? All of those are online, but it doesn't diminish that they actually are three distinct areas of interest and time commitment. And that's the thing you want to highlight, is the direction of those interests more so than the modality of those interests. The modality, colleges know that if things were closed down, online was what they had access to, in which case, how did you utilize the online tools that you had to continue to pursue your interests? Let me know if that wasn't clear, if there are additional facets of that question. I'm happy to speak more to that, but that is maybe where I'll pause there.
Thank you, Corey. From our audience, we have a question from Miss Hong. So the question is, so while the AP score is no longer evaluated in the application, should I continue to take it? Thank you.
Yeah. So the rigor of class is still very important. So if at your school, you have some schools, you take what you take and you have no choice, in which case, totally fine. This conversation isn't relevant for you. If at your school, you have the opportunity to choose or push yourself to take higher level classes or more rigorous classes, the thing that will continue to be true on your transcript is strong grades in classes that are as rigorous as your school offers that you can handle, right? That's what they want to see. So if you don't take 5 AP classes, if that is going to be something where you really, really, really struggle academically to keep up with any of them, take a challenge that's kind of like a proximal goal, right? What can you easily handle? And then push yourself maybe like one step beyond that to really challenge yourself and say, can I rise to this challenge? So taking classes, absolutely, you should absolutely always be pushing for more rigor for yourself, both for yourself, right, and your own learning, as well as how that then will reflect on the application. In terms of taking the test, that is a little bit of like a case-by-case basis and mostly up to you. It's not that AP test scores won't be looked at necessarily. Some schools will look at them as part of the admissions process. Some schools won't. Your grade in the class is definitely more important than your grade on the test, particularly because the format changed. A lot of the tests went online for the past couple of years. So those tests are just that specific exam, right, with the specific 3, 4, 5 that you may have gotten, that's being weighed a little bit less heavily. If you got 5s, awesome, like let that shine, right? But if you got 3s or 4s or even 2s and you like didn't do as well as you wanted to, the key takeaway is that that is less important than like you really nailing the class and you getting an A in the class. The big thing is that AP exams are both used in admissions of like, how did a student do on again, a standardized test where every student took a similar thing. That's being de-emphasized, but way colleges use AP exams might still be beneficial to you. So a lot of schools will still grant credit for AP exams, right? The function of AP exams is to grant credit. So if you're able to get a 4 or a 5 on your test in a given subject, different schools have different policies, and a school that you end up applying to and getting into and going to might say that, cool, you got 4s and 5s, you already walk into college with X number of credits, or placing out of calculus, we don't need you to retake that if you just got a 5 on your BC Calc test. Cool, that just gives you more flexibility in college. That's potentially a little cheaper because you've already accomplished certain credits. So in short, I'll summarize. Taking the classes, absolutely keep on keeping on. If you're in AP classes, great job and good luck, right? In terms of the test, probably try to take the test if that feels reasonable for you. If you do really well, that's only good news. If you don't, it's not actually that big of a deal, probably. And if you do well and you have those credits, that might actually be really beneficial for how those are used in college.
Great, thank you, Corey. We do have a few questions regarding the personal statement in the list of questions. The first one is, which topics should I consider writing about in my personal statement?
Yeah, that is a big question, right? That's a big one. So we didn't talk much about the essays, but that is a thing that we do very, very heavily with our students, and is something that we spend hours and hours talking about with our students, because the reality is that those things should be different per student, right? Some general tips of like how to approach a topic for a personal statement include thinking about the ways in which your experience differs from those around you. So for instance, right, if you find that you, or let me put it this way. So there's a couple ways to like have that topic be chosen by you and really to stand out. The couple key elements of that are, we always want to show your capacity to grow over time, right? Think about 2 points in time and think about how your perspective has shifted a little bit, right? It could be relatively subtle, but how has your perspective shifted from point A in time to point B in time? And how have you grown? How have your questions changed? How have you observed the world or yourself or a topic slightly differently than you did before a certain event, right? So that's one way to approach it, is we want to show that you're capable of change over time. Colleges are looking for young adults who can continue to grow. We want to show, look, I've been able to use my opportunities to grow in my experience. We also want to be really, really, really specific. So anytime that you write something that could feel like it's true about a bunch of other students, strike it, start over, use more specific language about your particular experience, right? And one way to do that more easily is to think about experiences you've had that are uncommon, or perspectives that you have that are uncommon, or unlikely connections. Okay, so for instance, let's say that you're on a sports team. So a really common topic is, I'm on this sports team, and through this, through playing soccer, for instance, or football, I learned about teamwork. Okay. It's not that that's not valuable. In fact, it's very valuable. It's not that that's not important. In fact, it's very important. It also is just very common, right? Hopefully, students who have joined teams learn the value of teamwork. So what is maybe a more interesting version of that is how your experience playing football, or your experience playing volleyball, or your experience in sports has caused you actually to start to think about hierarchy, or start to think about that like spurred your interest in conflict, right? Which then made you really interested in international relations. Whoa, all of a sudden, that's like a really distinct way for us to understand that you utilized the experiences you had to make connections, right? Making uncommon or unexpected connections between things, where you're like, I thought about conflict in sports, right? And how that mimics conflict in the world. And like, that makes me really interested in history, right? Or international relations, et cetera. So there's a lot of openness in personal statement topics, but one of the things that we typically do and start with our students is having them just really start a list of like identifying what we call content mapping, which is really starting to get a sketch of like, what's my family like? What are the relationships that are really important to me? What are the experiences that have felt really impactful? What do I feel really passionate about? And notice where you feel a little spark of excitement, right? Where you're like, oh, I do look different here than my friends. It's not that you're better and your friends are worse, right? Your friends are also valuable, but how are you distinct from your closest peers? And those are then the things to really dig into and draft and draft and draft and draft again and edit and get feedback and continue to push yourself for more specificity. The last thing that I'll say about the personal statement is that it just must be about you, right? So the topic should be you, literally you. So it's not that if you end up writing about your involvement in an activity, it shouldn't be that this club is great. The topic of that would be the club, right? If you're writing about your relationship with your grandmother, it shouldn't be like, my grandmother is amazing. True, not about you, right? What we want to make sure is that for this particular task, the function of this is for you to talk about you and how you've grown and how you show up in your communities and your spaces and your family for yourself. Okay, so those are some of the kind of very big questions. The big thing to do is just start somewhere. Start with like, notes to a document or pencil to paper, and start getting a sense of what are the important experiences that you've had, and consider how have you changed over the past couple of years, and how have you shifted and grown over time. That's a webinar for another day is personal statement topics, but great question. Hopefully that felt at least a little helpful for you.
Right. Thank you, Corey. Who from the audience today has a question? What are some specific contributions that a college administration committee will particularly want a scholar to make to their school/community when they grant him/her the fully funded scholarship?
Oh, that's a great question. That's a great question. So the question that I hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like, how can you show that the investment of like a full scholarship would actually like mean that that person is really contributing to community? That's the thing that I hear. And the way to do that is really similar to all the other things that we've been talking about, right? Admissions and scholarship are not really treated so differently, other than just like the caliber, right? Typically scholarships are a bit more selective, particularly if they're merit-based. For schools that are financial aid, like need-based financial aid, that has less to do with the sort of considerations that are required for like merit-based scholarships. So there's a couple different types of funding that the way that those are evaluated differs a little bit. But for a scholarship, the name of the game is just how can you demonstrate that you are really superlative, right? In any area, right? So it's not that there are particular contributions that are more heavily privileged than others. The things that often reflect really well in applications are things like intellectual prowess and vulnerability and self-reflection and personal insight, compassion. So if you find yourself talking about things that might actually read as being like negative attributes of a person, then definitely steer clear of those. Those will not be seen really positively in the admission space or in like scholarship spaces as well. So it really is thinking about, like, for you personally, how do you most valuably show up to communities? And it might be that you are very social and you're like a really big support system to people, or it could be that you really are super interested in literature and you like geek out on 19th century poetry from women, right? In which case, like, cool, let that be then, like, you don't need to shy away from that. Let that thing be a full deep dive in your application of how passionate you are about this thing. But, you know, often they're looking for very specific interests that have been developed, right? So often we might be interested in a thing, but we've never done any research on the thing. That's totally normal, but that's not then the thing to highlight in your application. You want to highlight in your application what you're curious about and how you've already followed some of that curiosity academically or personally or socially. So if you are like, I feel curious about psychology, but I've never done anything in psychology, that's totally fine. Start there, right? Are there some books or articles you can read? Can you watch some lectures online? Then what are you curious about? Is this still something you care about? How can you keep pushing? Is there research you might be able to do in psychology? Is there, are there online classes that you can take in psychology, even if your school doesn't offer it? So I would say, particularly for scholarships in the academic realm, they're looking for interest and that you've like followed that interest somewhere, right? And there's no like one way that looks, but it's just a demonstrating that, again, you've really like made use of whatever resources you have, even if the only resource is the internet. The internet is a huge resource. Use it. Cool. Thanks, Zoe.
Thanks, Corey. We do have 10 minutes left on the webinar. We have 2 questions left. We'll try to address them. And then, yeah, we're gonna finish for the night. So anonymous attendee has a question about activities. Whether the in-school clubs or project or the social ones which one are more beneficial for the application?
Both are valuable, right? And I think the question is where those might show up. So, you know, if by social contributions you mean engagement with your friends or engagement with your, you know, with your classmates, that definitely is valuable. That might not show up as an activity. If by social activities you mean doing things around like school spirit or clubs that are, I don't know, organizing school dances or things like that, that is definitely of value, right? And it's not necessarily that is more or less valuable than other things. I would say the bigger question is just like consider where those things that are important to you might show up and what you gain from it. So if from those social things you're like, I love bringing people together and I love creating opportunities for like synergy and interesting connection and like collisions of people and ideas, awesome, right? Maybe that actually is a thing that you get to talk about a lot in your essays, right? And you can use some specific social things that you've organized to talk about why you love that so much. And let me just make sure I'm remembering the question. Yeah, Zoe, do you have clarification?
Yeah, I think I'm just guessing, but I think the student meant that like comparing the impact of the in-school clubs and project and the out of school, like the activities that do not belong in the school. I think that's what he meant by social.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. So in school, out of school, all fair game, right? So again, it has to do just with like where you can invest deeply. So if all of your activities are in school and that's what you have access to and that's what you dig and that's what you like feel like you are a really active participant in, then in school is great, right? Push yourself to say like, what can we accomplish in this school community in whatever capacity that is. Out of school, certain out of school things can sometimes be maybe more impressive, but not necessarily, right? Like in school, there are definitely ways that in school activities can still show leadership and initiative and deep investment in your particular community, which is your school. Out of school, things that are really valuable out of school are like there's many, right? But there are a lot of volunteer organizations that if you feel particularly passionate about service that are really valuable, that research programs, if you're applying into certain rigorous like intellectual programs that push an understanding of business, or maybe it's a marketing class. So out of school is definitely an opportunity where if you have a particular interest that is not available to you in school, do pursue it outside of school, right? But it's not that one is better than the other, right? Just looking at like, what are you interested in and where do you have, where might you have the best access to the experience that you want or the development that you want? And it might be in school, it might be out of school, both are valid.
Yes, thank you, Corey. The final question of the night we have from Pink. He said, I'm not excellent at writing, therefore my essay may not be hard touch to the admission. Still, I have a chance to get scholarship then. And if yes, are there any advices to make the admission more impressed on my application? Thanks for your time.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. So writing is a really important skill that is demonstrated on the application and then really heavily utilized in college. And I think it depends on your year. Maybe some clarity if you could answer what year you are, that might be helpful. Because if you're a little bit younger, spending a lot of time reading, practicing writing, maybe take a writing class to help develop that skill is going to be really important. If you're applying this year and your application process is right now, right, then focus on what you're trying to say and having that be really the big thing, and then enlist some support, right? Who are those who are maybe better writers in your community? Are you working with a coach or a center, or are there friends or parents or teachers who have really strong command of English and have really strong writing skills that can help you then structure those thoughts? Your task, I think, would be making sure that the content is really particular to you and highlights what you want to say in your application, right? The what is going to be the most important thing then for you, more than a command of writing. So specifically, and if English levels or writing levels are really far from actually what you would need in order to do well in college, right? There's actually a lot of other pathways that you can take, right? There are different, maybe a gap year, there's some community colleges, there are like 2+2 programs where if you really do need a lot more writing support, and if you're like, I'm not going to be able to handle a really rigorous writing curriculum yet, there are definitely ways where those programs can like structure that growth for you and help you actually develop those skills in a more substantive way. So if younger, that's then a big opportunity and a thing to work on. Always content is going to be key, but making sure that you are both pushing your own writing skills and that you're potentially working with somebody who can help guide you and help you make sure that your structure of writing is clear and that your grammar and language use is also correct is going to be really important.
Thank you, Corey, and thank you everyone for staying with us till 10 p.m. on a Sunday. We really appreciate you all being here, and especially thank you to Corey for spending time with us and talking to us about this on a Sunday morning. We really appreciate it, Corey. And for those who missed the live workshop, came in a little bit late, we did record the whole section, and videos will be available on Sparkprep YouTube channel. And in case you have further questions about the application process, and if you are interested in working with us, do send me an email. I'm typing my email right in the chat box for you to have. And yeah, that's all. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all
have
so
a great
much.
Sunday night.
Have a great night,
Bye.
everybody. Bye. Hope to
Thank
see
you,
you
Corey.
soon.